If it's happening in New York, New Jersey, or Long Island, hear about it with Joe Piscopo. Mornings, 6 to 10 on AM 970. The Answer.
Portions of this show sponsored by Route 22 Toyota.
9:25, this is the Piscopo in the Morning Show. Frank Morano here with Al Gattullo, Anthony Pope, and John Tabacco. And one of my all-time favorite writers, commentators on any subject, because he always manages to go opposite the way of mainstream public opinion, and that you read his reasoning and you find out he's not just a contrarian for contrarian's sake, but he's actually done something that no one else thought to do, which is to add and to read. I'm talking, of course, about Steven Malanga. He's a fellow at the Manhattan Institute, a senior editor with City Journal. Whether the issue is legalized sports betting or deductibility of state and local taxes, there is nobody that puts more work into actually researching the issues that everyone else just talks about than Steven Malanga from the Manhattan Institute. Steve, thanks for coming in this morning.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to live up to that introduction.
Oh, please. Yeah, you're going to be fine. Now, Steve, there's a lot I want to talk to you about, including some of your recent pieces in City Journal, which is a must-read publication for anyone that's serious about learning about public policy. But yesterday and in the previous days, we've been talking about this notion that New York and New Jersey are what they call donor states. Every politician in New York and New Jersey, Republican or Democrat, they scream, they love to yell, say, New York sends $40 billion more to Washington than we get back in taxes. But you've pointed out, you were the first person that I ever really heard pointed out, that that notion is completely fallacious. Why?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, if you look at what they count, when they talk about donor states, they talk about money going to Washington in taxes, but they also talk about money coming back, and it's the balance. What's the difference between the two in the states? The largest area of money coming back to New York and New Jersey and everywhere in the country, the largest area is actually retirement income from the federal government, mostly Social Security. Okay, now we have what you would call a deficit on a per capita basis. We don't get as much as other places because people retire and they get out of here. Okay, but that money, all right, that money is not money that the federal government, like Congress, can't just say, well, we're going to send more of that to New Jersey, right? It's not like they're saying we're going to subsidize something like, the Gateway, tunnel for $30 billion, right? That's not discretionary money. It's money that we're losing because people aren't choosing to stay here, aren't choosing to live here. Even our public sector workers, when they retire, are leaving.
So New York and New Jersey have made it impossible to retire here.
So we're a net loser. Another big area of money coming in all around the country, of money leaving Washington, is defense spending. Once upon a time, we had tremendous defense industries in this region. We get very, very little of that money. That's not Washington's fault either. Whose fault is that we drove manufacturing out of this area? The Brooklyn Navy Yard, those were huge.
Stapleton Homeport, Staten Island.
Well, Staten Island. Staten Island was a perfect example. People don't realize that actually the Reagan administration targeted a couple of places in New York to open Army and Navy bases because they noticed that there was so little defense spending come here. And what happened? In the Dickens administration, they actually opposed keeping the Staten Island Homeport open. They said, we don't want those nuclear submarines, we don't want those nuclear-powered ships here. So, when you look at actually what constitutes money going and coming, and the money that goes, the reason we send a lot here is because we have a very progressive income tax in America, okay? And our higher salaries here send more money to Washington. The problem is that every time we vote on cutting taxes, it's the representatives in New York City, for instance, always vote against it. Yeah. So they're voting against our economic interests.
We're going to have you back to talk about that. But during the break, I was listening to John Tabacco and Anthony Pope compare the millions that they've made from cryptocurrency and Bitcoin.
Disclaimer.
And so, like, John's a
matrimonial attorney will have him fit.
I'm just kidding. For the record, I'm just kidding. But John Tabacco is an expert on the economy. He's gone through all the reasons that this economy is roaring. 4.1% growth, record low unemployment rate across the board. But there are some sectors that, even though there's plenty of people that want to work, that still can't find enough qualified workers. You had a fascinating column in City Journal entitled Dirty Jobs, Good Pay. What's happening in certain sectors of the economy with respect to the workers that they're looking for?
Well, here's the crucial thing. We spend a lot of time talking about the jobs that are leaving America, the good jobs we no longer have. And we have lots of good jobs here that industries, including high-tech manufacturing and, of course, trade industries, cannot fill. Now, the thing is, we've got under 4% employment in the United States, under 4% unemployment in the United States right now, and so it's tough to fill jobs. But in the construction industry and in other industries, high-tech manufacturing, even back in 2011, when we were still recovering from the recession, there are high-tech manufacturers that couldn't fill jobs. Now we're at the point where the home building industry cannot build homes to meet the need around America because they don't have enough workers. Part of it is we've really de-emphasized blue-collar work. With this whole idea of a college for everybody has gotten so carried away that now we have students with $1 trillion in college debt. Only 60% of those who enter college actually finish in 4 years. So the other 40% are coming out without a degree and they've got college debt. Many of these people would be suitable for these kinds of jobs, but we've so demonized blue-collar work in America, and that's a big problem. And our trade schools are an example of this. You know, we've really essentially de-emphasized vocational education in America. To the credit of Mayor Bloomberg, he restarted some of the vocational schools in New York. He put more of an emphasis back on that. We're starting to see that, but that's really a drop in the bucket. This is really a nationwide problem right now.
So what about that, John? The notion that maybe we're better off emphasizing trade schools, professions like being an electrician, construction trades, being a plumber, rather than forcing all these students to be forced to saddle a lifetime of debt when they still are not going to become philosophers and art historians. Philosophers and art historians.
You know what? I'm a proud, Italian, Irish American, but my ancestors came here from Italy, and their hands got into New York City and built the masonry and the brick, which became the foundations of the infrastructure of the capital of the world. We're always going to need craftsmen. We're always going to need people that can do vocational things. I don't think the government needs to get so involved that they start to force people into vocations. But what I will say is this, on the student loan debt, I did a calculation. My daughter Victoria is 20. She's a sophomore in Seton Hall University, so I understand that college costs about $200,000 now. These kids can get out of college making $100,000. That's supposing they get a job. They get $100,000. They take home 50% of their pay. They got $50,000, $4,000 a month. If you do the math on them living and then paying their college debt, they can never get out of debt. They could never pay off their debt unless they have some amazing windfall where they get a lump sum. But if they just progress with, cost of living and their salary increases over years, they could pay their minimum payments for about 30
Anthony,
years.
listening to these numbers from John, I'm starting to think you and I are the smartest guys here because we don't have any kids to send to college.
Well, my daughter is out, so they're both done with that. But the bottom line is, I think that certainly the trades and the vocational schools have been under supported over the years because it became something that the American dream was to own your own home and to go to college. And every family that's, come from a different country felt that was what was important. But college don't do it. It doesn't do it anymore. You're not getting out of college with great jobs. It's just not there. The student debt is ridiculous. The cost of living is ridiculous. And I think emphasis should be put on vocational schools and the trades. Right. We really need that.
There's actually a wide disparity when people graduate from college and what they earn. Something like, I forget what the number is, 30% of college graduates after 5 years are basically underemployed. So in addition to the 40% of people who are going to college who aren't getting a degree, 30% of those who wind up graduating are actually making much less than the average college a graduate. They're underemployed, and a lot of that has to do with the field they choose to go in and the way the marketplace works. And the point is this: the government shouldn't. You're right. They shouldn't force people into jobs. But what we have to do is stop incentivizing people the other way.
Right.
We're incentivizing everybody to go the other way, and that's actually having perverse consequences.
And I also want to ask you, Steve, and if people are just tuning in, we're talking with Steven Malanga. He is a contributing editor to City Journal and a fellow with the Manhattan Institute. There's been a lot of talk about privacy rights. All morning long, we've been talking about some of the controversies involving Facebook and the other social media sites. You so often hear the Googles of the world, the smartphone companies, villainized, rightly so, I think, in many instances, for infringing upon the privacy rights of people. You've written a bit about how it's not just these private social media companies and marketing firms that are trying to infringe upon our privacy, but it's government. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, here's what I mean. Especially, City Journal writes about cities. And one of the biggest issues, people have probably heard this term, is smart cities. Smart cities is basically the idea, let's apply technology to government in order to make government more efficient. Sounds great, but what's happening, and this started basically in 10 years ago, IBM, if you remember those smart city ads that they were running on TV, I used to see them during NFL games all the time. I don't know who their market was, but the whole idea of smart cities, we're going to use technology to make cities smarter. But as the technology evolves, what we're basically doing is monitoring people more and more. You have these smart cities around the world. There's one in South Korea that was built. You have a smart city being planned in Toronto, or smart neighborhood. And these things are filled with sensors, not only red light cameras, but actually sensors in the street. The whole idea is theoretically to make the city more efficient, but what happens is they're collecting all these data on people, and now people are starting to worry about that. And the other thing that's happening, and this is right out of television, remember that series 24, the terrorists, right?
Yeah.
This is right out of television. All of this is based on the Internet of Things, which is what links things in the ground like sensors and stuff, and now they're starting to be hacked. I mean, we had, people don't know that there was a small dam in upstate New York that was hacked by the Chinese. They were trying to change the controls to unleash the water. That someone hacked the sirens, the air raid sirens in Dallas a couple of months ago. They all went off. So the other problem is, as we want to make cities smarter and smarter, we're actually opening the door to Russian hackers, Chinese hackers, and American hackers to do things. The biggest problem is with the electricity grid, a huge problem that everybody's really worried about now, because that's vulnerable. And when you shut down the electricity, even if it's, well, we all remember what happened in the blackout here in the East Coast. And I mean, I was stuck in New York in darkness for,
Oh, no, that was certainly inconvenient. Is there anything you could give us to be optimistic about, Steve? So far, we've got everybody that's got a college education has a lifetime of debt.
Doom and gloom, Steve.
Construction companies can't hire anyone qualified.
Have a breakfast, calzone, and we'll catch up with you later.
Chef David Burke left here. Everyone was smiling.
We were all happy. We were eating calzone.
My
All of a
goodness.
sudden, we got the
Sorry I came to work this morning.
and the workaphobe.
I'm glad you asked, though, because we do have a tendency, and maybe this is this is talk radio, but we do have a tendency, of course, to talk about what's wrong these days. People get excited about, respond to that. But look, we've got under 4% unemployment, some of the lowest unemployment numbers we've seen in decades. If you would have thought back in 2008 that was going to be the case, you would have been shocked. We also have essentially new industries, arriving. The thing that I am actually most optimistic about in the United States is we are on the verge of becoming the leading energy producer in the world.
Right.
Not in New York State, because we won't allow it, but in the world because of what's going on here. The technological advancements for someone like me who remembers gas lines, waiting in gas lines, trying to get home from college and stuff like that, the technological innovation of that is stunning, and it gives us not only political power, but frankly, it powers our economy.
Wow.
Hold on, Frank. Before Steve leaves, maybe we should give him a cup of smart coffee.
Elevate. There you go.
Elevate him a little, and this coffee right here increases your energy. You don't need you don't have any problem there. It's gonna burn fat. It's gonna curb your cravings.
It's going to give me a jolt, in other words.
But
right?
it makes you happy.
There you go.
You're
The
already
dopamine.
smart, but maybe a happy coffee to turn the mood a little more positive.
Steve Malanga, I learned a lot this morning. Thank you for coming in. Hope to
thanks
see
for
you
having
again
me.
soon.
All
Yes,
right.
thank you so
Take
much.
care.
All right, Steve
Great.
Malanga from the Manhattan Institute. Read his work in City Journal.
Everybody knows this guy. No, everybody knows he can do a radio show. Joe Piscopo. Mornings, 6 to 10 on AM 970. The Answer.